one thing that really struck me this week, which I wanted to talk to you about before we get into that, is the safety of our politicians is very concerning. We've had 2 British politicians murdered in the last 8 years or so. And we've just had your Justice Minister, Mike Piers, saying he's going to quit Parliament at the next election after a series of death threats from Islamist extremists and an arson attack on his constituency office. And he said that he escaped being killed by David Amos's killer by the skin of his teeth because he happened to not be in his constituency when that killer was looking at his office. But you have, obviously, I presume, a lot of threats, but you have a lot of security that deals with it. That goes with the job, as it does in many of the offices of state. But the average MP doesn't have that. And it just struck me, is it not time, and is it in your gift to do this, to actually give every single member of Parliament, on both sides, all parties, a bodyguard, a security guard? I think the public would support that. I don't want to see more elected officials murdered.
No, of course, no one wants to see that. And actually I was speaking to Mike just yesterday, and it's awful what he's had to endure, his office essentially being attacked and set on fire, the threats he's received, and everyone, regardless of the political party that they're a member of, gets into this because they believe in public service.
And that's true, actually. A really good point is how they talk about the radical Islamist who murdered a politician and tried to go after another. They never mention the white nationalists. How strange. How weird.
Want to make a difference, and they should be able to do that without fearing for their personal safety. Now, actually, Houses of Parliament have put in place over the years more things to protect MPs, security in their offices, at their homes, and it's something that's constantly being reviewed. But I think as well as looking at that, which you're right, of course we should do, which are the practical things, we've also got to look at the ideology that is driving that kind of behaviour, and that's making sure that we tackle it at its root, right? What we can't have is that kind of extremist ideology festering in communities, on our streets, that leads people to behave in that particular way. And I think,
unless, of course, it's my Home Secretary helping it fester. The only time when terrorism is bad is when the brown people do it, when the white nationalists do it, or when there are gangs of roaming white nationalists who've been goaded into roaming the streets to cause a ruckus because of the Home Secretary. These aren't connected at all. And this ideology is not festering communities whatsoever. It's just the rightful cry of what the upper classes would deem as being the noble savages of the working man.
I think that's equally important.
Do you think the idea of each of them having a security guard is a good idea?
No, well, generally these are better answers that are, well, questions that are better put to the police and our security services. I mean, look, there may well be an argument for that.
It seems to me they're very vulnerable in their constituency offices. Every MP.
And more protection has been put in place at most MPs' constituency offices where they have access to alarm systems and more entry systems.
To assume you're looking at this?
In general, as I was talking to Mike and talking to others, we always want to make sure that MPs are safe. And as you said, it's incredibly sad what we've seen. But as well as the practical security of MPs, which is paramount, it's the culture that leads to that type of extremist behaviour. It doesn't just impact MPs, it impacts other people as well. And we've got to be equally tough on calling out that kind of behaviour as well.
It's like, I know that he knows that white nationalism is a problem. Every single Prime Minister gets told this because the security state knows this very, very well. There's a really high chance of white nationalist terrorism. They know it's true. And Rishi knows it's true. But it's interesting, he says, we just have to deal with the ideology. And everybody else is listening to that going, oh yes, exactly, the radical Islam, that's the real problem. When, of course, all of these ideologies that is going to lead people to assassinate politicians is going to be a problem. Regardless of whether, the far-right brown people are doing it or whether the far-right left people are doing it.
Do you get told about threats to you?
I mean, yes.
Is it unnerving?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm very fortunate in the sense I have an incredible team of people whose job it is to keep me safe, and it comes with the territory. What's
interesting is that all of the security services know that the chance of any radical left-wing terrorism is never going to fucking happen because they've all got moles in every single leftist institution and they know as much as we know that all the leftists are doing are sitting in their fucking reading groups and arguing over whether or not baristas are proletarian or not. They know full well that any kind of organised plot for left-wingers to engage in any terrorism is never going to happen because left-wingers are fucking useless.
Remember, people came and protested at my house, which was obviously slightly unsafe. Actually, I think that happened literally while I was on my way over to the States with you on the plane. That was happening, and that is unnerving because when you're home is invaded in that way, you feel very vulnerable. But it isn't just about me. It actually goes to a broader thing. I want my 2 girls to be able to grow up in a society that's safe.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. People, MPs who get murdered, right, by actual terrorists, both Islamist and white nationalist, that's the same as protesters turning up at your house about the genocide that you're supporting. Everything about these things is identical, and there's going to be no further societal problems for you implying that pro-Palestinian protesters are the same as terrorists who murder MPs.
Is why I'm quite focused on putting more police officers on the street, crucially giving them the tough powers they need to, say, confiscate knives off people, which is really important. Make sure we have things like CCTV and street lighting, so girls like mine, when they grow up, and women can feel safe when they walk home at night. Like, that's the type of society that I want, the type of country that we should have.
People feel concerned when they see these pro-Palestinian marches, many of whom are marching completely peacefully and for all the right reasons, and should be respected. But there are plenty of people brazenly flouting the laws, supporting Hamas, chanting jihad, chanting from the river to the sea. And I think people feel that more should...
Okay, so from the river to the sea, that's supporting Hamas. You'd think after all of his debates with Norman Finkelstein and Cenk Uygur and Low-Key and Hussam Zomla, Piers Morgan might at some point have realised that anybody who is pro-Palestinian is not therefore pro-Hamas. Yeah, because supporting Hamas and saying from the river to the sea and calling for jihad, not that I've seen anybody call for jihad on any of these marches. Maybe he's mistaking intifada for jihad because, of course, Piers Morgan has the IQ of a 5-year-old. And so just hears any words in any foreign language, any Muslimy language. It's all the same. It's all the same to me. When intifada just means uprising or resistance, and jihad just means like a holy war, which can be both violent and non-violent, whatever it was, or struggle. It can be. I think they just said intifada, and that's the same as saying they want all Jews dead. That's what they're saying in the Palestine protests. Nonsense, complete nonsense. And this is again within the context of a discussion around the safety of MPs, trying to paint people who say from the river to the sea or whatever as being equivalent to people who murder MPs.
Should be done to stop that. If more is not done, then it fuels that kind of extremism and emboldens them.
Yeah, which is completely wrong. And some of the scenes that we've seen are unacceptable. I mean, the rise of anti-Semitism in particular.
I mean, unironically, if Team America, when they were doing the Durka Durka Muhammad Jihad thing, if they were doing that to satirise the way in which white people are scared of brown people, hilarious, would have been great, would have been really, really funny. But it's just them being Islamophobic. That's it. So that's an unironic way loads of people think about Islam or think about Arabic countries. All they can think of is they just said an Arabic word and therefore they must be a terrorist. River to the Sea is an emancipatory chant. It's a bad faith weaponization of anti-Semitism. Nothing said about Netanyahu holding up maps at the UN. Well, exactly. I mean, there are probably certain people who use From the River to the Sea in the same way that Hamas do. But the origin of the phrase is one of the PLO in the 60s, right? That's where the phrase originates from. And the PLO, from its initial founding documents, favoured a singular state solution which didn't have any ethnic characteristics associated with it.
Over the last few months is appalling. I mean, in our country, in this age,
Jewish people feel genuinely
afraid. My friends, your friends, when their kids are not wearing their school uniform, right? When they're hiding their Star of Davids. I mean, this is.
What do you feel about that?
Yeah, I feel shocked to my core that in our country, in this age.
Yet, no comments here at all from Piers or Rishi. No comments at all from either of them about people having their Palestinian pins taken off them. People being arrested for saying just things that are not deemed to be pro-Israel enough. Literally, people being taken off the streets, arrested by the police for using the word intifada, for example. Nonsense, absolute nonsense. And again, they're equivocating between this, as if that's either that is just kind of de facto Jew hatred, or even worse, could theoretically be the kind of people who would threaten the lives of politicians. This is so dangerous, this rhetoric.
That has happened, that people feel that they have to hide their identity. It's obviously appalling. So what are we doing? Well, we're giving more funding to the organisation that protects Jewish places of faith, for example, and others, and we're talking to the police about whether extra powers are needed to properly police these protests. So that is a conversation.
And again, I'm not saying that Jewish people don't feel scared. I think they do. I'm not saying that anti-Semitism hasn't risen very, very strongly in the last few months. It absolutely has. These things are all true. These things are all true, but that shouldn't impugn the vast majority of people who are at these protests who are not anti-Semitic and are engaging anti-Semitism, but just do and say things that make the white people scared. And second of all, it doesn't absolve them from thinking that the only people who are being ethnically targeted because of the problems in Israel and Gaza, the what's going on, is only the Jewish population. Islamophobia also risen. Policing of legitimate Palestinian protest also happening. But they don't mention that, because that's not going to engage their audience getting mad about the scary brown people, is it?
Where I've been very clear, if we think that there are new powers that they need in order to effectively deal with some of the things that we're all seeing, then we are very open to doing that and legislating and bringing forward quite tough things. But right now, if there is someone that's breaking the law, I've been very clear with all the police. Those people should face the full force of the law. There should be absolutely no tolerance for this. And when people are doing things that we can all see with our own eyes, or people sharing videos, the police should be going after those people and getting them locked up. And that's what I've told them. But if they need more powers to do that, then that's what we will do.
I interviewed an
Because literally there's a really irritating account on Twitter called Hurry Up Harry that just posts clips from people at the protest, post people with their signs. Some of them reasonable criticisms. But the vast majority of it is just, they said a thing that people have told me is bad because it is pro-Palestinian and not pro-Israel. And then using that as some kind of carte blanche to say that the entire pro-Palestine movement is either anti-Semitic or anti-Western or anti-British, or shows that our culture has deteriorated, has been taken over by cultural Marxists, all that kind of bullshit, right? Again, the exact kind of tropes we've heard already here. They said the word intifada, therefore they must be an anti-Semite who wants to get rid of all Jewish people forever. When the actual history of intifada, literally the first intifada, which was organised by the PLO, was explicitly non-violent, explicitly so.
NHS doctor of more than 20 years, Wahid Shader, who also had a name, Abdul Wahid. He was the leader of the Islamist group Hizb ut-Tahrir Britain. And he'd been an NHS doctor the entire time that he was also running this group. You've just, as a government, prescribed them as a terror group. He is still registered with the General Medical Council. I mean, what should happen?
So I think my understanding is actually that the NHS are looking into all of that.
He's been suspended.
Yeah, so I think they're looking into that, and obviously professional bodies independent from the government. We've been very clear about Hizb ut-Tahrir. They should be a prescribed terrorist organisation. We're bringing forward the legislation to do that. And again, question for Keir Starmer, he want to talk...
When this is the kind of stuff that would get you expelled from the Labour Party, right? You used to be a member of a group that we've prescribed now, therefore we can remove you from society. Like, has this person left Hizb ut-Tahrir since it's been prescribed? Has it? I don't know, because if they do just leave, at the time it gets prescribed by the government, what's the problem? You're just using this as a way of being able to deperson people who have opinions that you disagree with. Opinions I also disagree with. I think, actually, I'm going to take a view which I don't think many left-wingers will share. I also believe that Hizb ut-Tahrir should be prescribed, not as a terrorist organisation, but as a banned organisation, for example, because I don't believe that their values are compatible with British values, personally. I don't think they should be. I think they're incredibly extremist, and they are also banned in other countries within Muslim nations because they are also people who don't share those values either. Right? These aren't traditional Muslim values too. But doesn't that mean that people who were previously a member before they were prescribed should then just be retroactively just expelled from their jobs? That's absolutely ludicrous.
Time represented Hizb ut-Tahrir. Actually, he supported them in resisting prescription elsewhere, and that's who he was on the side of. We're busy trying to ban these people, and he was busy trying to.
Do you think he's a terrorist sympathiser?
Well, I said the facts speak for themselves, right? Like he was their lawyer.
And incredible, like Hizb ut-Tahrir are not a terrorist organisation. They explicitly engage in non-violence. I just think their values are antithetical to anything resembling British values. Keir Starmer did represent Hizb ut-Tahrir, but they're not a terrorist group. And the idea that he would be a terrorist sympathiser for doing so, absolutely ridiculous. Of course, no. I'm sure there'll be zero introspection from anybody on the liberal side of things. They'll go, isn't it ridiculous that Piers Morgan is smearing Keir Starmer for being a terrorist sympathiser, for engaging in his actual job of defending people with the cab rank rule for Hizb ut-Tahrir as an attorney. But I'm sure all of the accusations for Jeremy Corbyn being a terrorist sympathiser, they were all incredibly legitimate. There was no political finagling there at all. It was never ever, for example, I don't know, exaggerated for political reasons by people both inside the party and without. But we'll leave that to rest. No introspection will ever happen in that, I can imagine.
When they were trying to resist this, we've just prescribed them because we think that's what they are. And I just speak, again, these things speak to people's values, right?
As a general principle, you shouldn't be able to continue as an NHS doctor if you are leading this group in this country.
Yeah, well, from this moment on, remember these things are forward-looking, but there's clearly questions to answer which the NHS are rightly looking at.
Because he came on my show and he was so brazen.
Yeah.
I mean, really brazen.
Well,
he celebrated October the 7th.
Yeah.
He felt it was resistance.
Forget,
punch in the face.
It's not obviously right for me to comment on individual people, but let me just be clear. Forget about working in a particular place. It is illegal.
Right.
For
It's
a
a crime.
prescribed.
I mean, when he was literally said, I support the attacks on October the 7th, that is support for Hamas, and that is supporting a proscribed terrorist organisation. So if you want to get him deregistered as a GP for that, then that's fine. If you can't get him deregistered from his job for supporting an organisation that you previously hadn't prescribed, but you now do retroactively, that makes no sense. The chant from the river to the sea, Israel is all you'll see, is unequivocally genocidal rhetoric. Zionists will lose their minds about Palestine will be free or utterly silent. Well, the thing is, right, that the reason why it's different, really important point, the reason why from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free is not genocidal rhetoric, but from the river to the sea, Israel is all you'll see is because Israel is officially an ethno-state. The people who say that phrase explicitly want to create a further expansion of their ethno-state across the territory of Palestine within the West Bank and Gaza. Therefore, it mandates there to be genocide. And that's why they think when people say the other thing, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, must be therefore the corollary to that, must be the antithesis to this. It's because they can't imagine there being a nation state on the Levant, which is not an ethno-state, even though the Palestinians don't want one and lived with Jews the whole time and have called for a secular, multi-ethnic, multi-racial democracy within the land of Palestine, which would mean it means that if you created a Palestinian state or Israel-Palestine, a joint state across the singular territory of Palestine, no Jews would be asked to leave. They would just not be the people who create the ethnic dimensions of what that state would say. It would no longer be an ethno-state. It would be a Palestinian Jewish state across those same boundaries, which is what the chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, will be, because there is freedom for everybody from the river to the sea, as Andy McDonald said, or between the river and the sea, rather. And that's where it comes from, because Zionists cannot understand the idea that secular, multi-ethnic democracies can exist. Even though we are British, we literally currently live in a secular, multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for memberships. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.